29 chapters between Matthew, Mark, and Luke and John. And only 4 chapters of those 4 Gospels focus on the first 30 years of Jesus' life. 85 focus on the last 3.5 years, and 29 of those 85 focus on the last week of Christ's time here on earth. And so it's pretty significant that we celebrate and we come to this moment in our sermon series that we take pause and we take this time to talk about Palm Sunday and what it was all about. You know, I've often thought about those early disciples and what it must have been like when Jesus would ask them to do things. You ever think about that? You think about that, and it's strange things sometimes, wouldn't he? Have you ever felt, has Jesus ever asked you to do something a little bit odd, a little bit different, a little bit strange? And they would question him, but after a while they realized that if Jesus asked you to do something, you just do it. How many learned that lesson already in life? Okay. For example, when they were out in the wilderness, there were thousands of people gathering to hear him, and there was no food. And so he says, you give them something to eat, Philip. And Philip starts counting how many people there are, on the hill that day, and he's figuring out how much this is going to cost. And Jesus is like, well, how much food do we have? What do we got? And the disciples tell him, well, there's a kid with some fish and a few loaves of bread, but I don't think that's going to cut it, maybe tongue in cheek. And Jesus says to him, what? Well, bring them to me. Bring them to me? Bring them to me? What is that all about? And how will that help with so many? And those disciples had a lot to learn, didn't they, in the course of their time with Jesus? Or when Jesus was standing in the boat preaching, and after he was done, he tells Peter to launch out into the deep and let's catch some fish. Cast your nets over the side. And Peter's like, Lord, no disrespect. I'm a fisherman, been doing this my whole life, been fishing all night long, and everybody knows, except you apparently, that you don't catch a lot of fish in the daylight. They just don't bite then. But the same old rebuttal, Lord, if it pleases you, we will do it. And they cast their nets out and they catch so many fish that their nets begin to break. Or how about the time when Peter was asked if his master pays temple tax? Now he's got the CRA after him, and Jesus says to Peter, go down to the lake and catch a fish. Then open its mouth, and inside you're going to find a coin valued at the right amount for you to pay your taxes. And so after a while, they're learning, they're catching on. When Jesus asks you to do something, you just do it. You don't question him. Don't bug him. You don't have a rebuttal. You just do what he says. And then we come to a situation like that in Matthew's gospel. Matthew 21, and it's a story of this triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem